Good morning. I'm Jen Clymer, and we are here today with Ron Howard, director for 13 Lives and Apollo 13 and Cocoon and Splash, all sorts of, water-based or number-based movies, 13 number. Yeah. Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Good, thank you. Um, this is a really compelling real story. And the way that you shaped it and presented it in this feature just tears your heart out.
Well, thank you. When I had the opportunity, the script came to me. It's not something that I developed, and like a lot of people, I had remembered the news event, and was thrilled that the boys were saved, but I had no idea what the particulars were of the rescue. And when I began to understand some really unique aspects of it, the fact that it was all about volunteerism, so much of what was achieved and which made a difference were people who didn't even have to be there. And so, unlike something like Apollo 13 or Backdraft, which you mentioned, those are about professionals applying what they know. And certainly there were people with skills, especially the divers, who came in and offered that expertise that made a difference. But again, the risks were high on so many levels. And yet these people came together, they ignored the differences, they didn't politicize it. They just did it. And I felt like that I, as a filmmaker, had a lot of filmmaking experiences behind me that would allow me to maximize the story, or or take a good shot at it anyway, on what I knew would be an okay budget, but not an extravagant one. And so I really felt like this was an opportunity to support a story that should be told in as many different ways as it possibly can be, because it really happened, and it's a kind of a miracle.
The interesting thing, I mean, so many interesting things that you bring to light in the feature is that the reason we all didn't know when it was happening live, what was actually going on, is they intentionally kept the methodology out of the public view.
Yeah. Yes.
And that moment when they bring, Dr. Harry, and we all don't know what his profession is, and the penny drops for him,
Yeah.
it it doesn't drop for us. Like, it makes us lean in a little bit more, and
Yeah.
then you understand why you didn't know the full story
Yeah.
when it was actually happening.
Exactly. And again, it was such an act of commitment and courage. Nobody involved believed that they were going to have a triumph at the end. They thought, well, look, if we save one or two kids, then it's worth it. But that means tragedy for 10 or 11 others. And they knew they were facing that, and knew they were even going to face scrutiny and possible legal action. I mean, they took all of that on, and not just the divers, but also the Thai leadership
Right? The
that
governor, the
took
minister.
that step. And of course in our movie we have the governor, but he had people, we show this, that he was answering to as well. The degree of difficulty on this film was really high, and it required so much commitment. I wouldn't equate it to the rescue, but we had our own sort of international sort of language barrier, cultural question marks, and things like that we had to learn to deal with. It was just a minuscule version, because there just was, obviously there's not the element of risk, but everyone was just so dedicated to meet the challenges, whatever they were, to get the cultural aspect to be right and authentic, but also to get that, those dive sequences to really reflect what really went on.
And I know we only have half an hour, and there are a million questions around all of that. Um, for me to close the loop on Dr. Harry, um, the choice to present his point of view when he comes out of the cave, not knowing if those first four boys survived,
Mhm.
Was that in the script, or was that something like that you knew we had to see that he took this giant leap and he was holding his breath,
Yeah.
in
I'm
a non-literal way
I'm
in
so
feeling.
glad you identified that moment because no one else has, and it's a really key moment, and I love it every time I see it because as a filmmaker, it reflects something about this process. Now, we weren't in I had one conversation with Dr. Harry, but we didn't have rights with him, and so we had to kind of learn what we could. Joel Edgerton, who's Australian, did his own research and came to me and said, I understand this moment happened. And I said, well, it's not in the script and we're on such a tight schedule, Joel. I just don't know. And one day I turned to my assistant director, Bill Connor, and I said, if we take 2 cameras and if we have 20 minutes, I can give Joel this chance to try to play this moment out. And let's see if it really works. And it was just going to be, and so Joel finished his day at like 11 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I said, Joel, this is the day if we were going to take a shot at this moment, which I like, but I don't know that there's any room for this in the movie. I really don't. But I respect you. He's also a director and a writer, and a very talented guy.
Yeah.
But more than anything, fighting for the truth and the reality of this story. And lo and behold, Bill Connor and I looked at each other at a certain point and said, well, we got about 32 minutes until we have to wrap. Let's go. And literally we did 3 takes with 2 different cameras. Joel nailed it. And we got a little coverage on the guy playing the medic. And I went home, it was one of those days where you go home feeling you got a little extra something. And I know everybody that I'm talking to understands that feeling of just wow, our professionalism, the fact that we were able to be efficient all day, it made space for something extra, something special to happen. And we did. There was a lot of that kind of passion, commitment, and creativity and contribution going on. Like the woman who played the mother, Blomholm, she was amazing.
She's
And the whole
amazing.
idea of the bracelets came from her. And the
Oh,
fact that
wow.
those bracelets had been blessed, and we knew something of that. The man Kage, who had the father with the sort of the little
The
straw
hat.
hat,
Hmm.
he's also from the north, from the northern region. They both are. They have a very specific dialect. So I needed them to speak that dialect, which not everybody, even from Bangkok, can understand it. It's very thick. But we needed to get that detail right as well. But Kage, who's a director there, directs experimental theater as well as acting. He put together these sort of spiritual moments. Not all of them made it into the movie, but they informed a kind of an authenticity because by all accounts, the spiritual energy around this cave and this event was palpable, whether you're religious or not. They all felt what the parents felt, that the mountain, this moment, the weather, the shrine to the princess, and their version of Buddhism, which includes animism and and a relationship with nature, it was in some way factoring into all of this. And even the most cynical divers, said by the end, they really, even they wouldn't really question that something miraculous had happened, and who knows how.
And you also add such a lovely moment with Viggo Mortensen at the end in terms of the bracelets, and you
Yeah.
see that kind of small crack in his facade because he's the tough guy. He's the pragmatic person. He
Well,
knows from the beginning it's not likely. And when he takes the stuff out of his pocket as he's getting his coffee ready, and that
it
bracelet just, ugh.
well, that was a moment again. That was inspired by the research, and in talking to one of the other divers who wasn't a central guy that we focused on, he was the one who said, well, I wasn't very spiritual, as the real Rick Stanton had told me as well. And he said, but on my way out of that cave, I had to take a moment and acknowledge the shrine to Princess Angnong and just recognize that something remarkable had happened. That doesn't mean that I've been converted to some formal religion, but something remarkable happened I had to acknowledge. And so that character wasn't featured. So I asked him if I could borrow it and use it and assign it to another character. And it made sense for that character to be, Vigo's character.
Yeah. So let me get to some of the residents' questions because I don't want to run out of time and I want to be very respectful of you joining us. We all appreciate
Thank you.
your efforts.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So Rick Lee wanted you to know he received a screener of 13 Lives in October. It's a terrific docudrama. Oh, we have a caller too.
Oh.
Richard, hold on 1 second for me, okay?
Yes.
Thank you. And you'll have to turn your TV down so we don't get the audio feedback. Okay, so Rick Lee said it's a terrific docudrama. I saw the documentary, The Actual Rescue of Those Soccer Players, and you were certainly clearer about the cave and the tunnel with the personal actor's touch using Viggo Mortensen and Colin Farrell. Both pictures are exciting and heartwarming at the conclusion. I don't have any questions, but I simply wanted to say how pleased I was with your presentation.
Well, thank you. He identifies there, why I wanted to take on the challenge, because there were already documentaries that existed. And I knew that Jimmy and Chai were making a documentary that was going to be great. They're great filmmakers. I didn't have a chance to see it. But until we were finished, but I felt like, well, what we can do with filmmaking, with directing, with the cinema of it, with our cinematographer Sayampu Mukti Pram, who's Thai, with our editor James Wilcox, what we can do is try to create that extra thing by dramatizing it that actors can bring, that the camera angles and the cinema of it can create. So you have just a little more empathy. You have a different kind of connection to the story than a documentary can give you. And I love documentaries, and in recent years I've been directing them. And I think in some ways my experience making documentaries is informing what I'm doing in the scripted world. And I think it certainly had an impact on the filmmaking, around 13 Lives.
Yeah. So Rick Lee, thank you for submitting that. We're going to hand it over to Richard for a moment for your question. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Ron. It's an honor to have you on the air with us today. And I am a 38-year member of the VGA as well. And I've done a lot of special effects through features in the Visual Effects Society board and so forth. But watching your career from OP to you sitting there right now has been quite a journey. But as you evolved into a director, starting with Cocoon and then through A Beautiful Mind and Da Vinci Code and Apollo 13, the list goes on, you've used special effects quite a bit. And you've used them in a really beautiful way and not making them important per se. One of my most beautiful shots, or one of your most beautiful shots that I've always loved, was the shot in A Beautiful Mind of the rain on the window when Russell Crowe sees all the formulas and math and so forth. That was such a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
I have one question. Well, I love 13 and thought it was beautifully done, but I wanted to ask you one question about Apollo 13. Did you shoot a few shots in the Vomit Comet?
Yes.
Flying that weightless arc with the inside the plane.
Well, we shot for 13 days in the Vomit Comet, and we would shoot sometimes 2 flights a day, and we would get between 30 and 50 parabolas, and each parabola we would go weightless for 23 seconds, and about 17 or 18 seconds of that would be sort of real stable weightlessness. And so I was up there, so were the camera operators. And so we did all the wide shots and all the 0G stuff that you see. It was before digital could have helped us out in that way. So it would have been dangling wires and wasn't even the technology to do good wire removals then. So yeah, it was remarkable, you know, what the actors went through. And I have to say, not as quite as challenging, but I underestimated what the water work was going to be like on 13 Lives.
I
And
have several questions about that.
well,
Yeah.
the difference between working in a large tank or the open ocean where there's plenty of room, I had no idea how exponentially complex it was going to be to try to dramatize scenes in these super tight quarters. We had a great underwater cinematographer, but the challenge of lighting under there and actually making it murky and mysterious and not look lit, and yet giving the actors enough freedom. The actors committed to doing all the diving themselves, which liberated us a lot. Once they had the expertise, they did it. They had a few moments where they were, you know, felt anxiety, and they revealed that to me later, but not while we were doing it, because they were afraid I would pull the plug on the approach. They knew I was a little dubious about them doing all the work, but once they were committed, they did. And it was much more challenging. We had a water unit going simultaneously, and we thought it was going to be sort of 30 of our 50 days, and it wound up being 48 of our 50 shooting days. We came in on budget because there were other efficiencies, but that water work just it required such meticulous care. Not only was it tricky, but you know, there's an element of risk, and places where the divers, there could be no safety diver right alongside them. And so, you know, we had to be very, very thoughtful about the way we approached it, and creatively, you know, what we got and how we edited it to try to help tell the story in those very murky environments.
You know, you've done so many films with effects, and as you well know, there's nothing you can imagine these days that we cannot create, you know, from using all the technology that we have, you know, water, dust, smoke, vapor, destruction, and so forth. But when you are looking at projects these days, obviously you enjoy doing special effects in some context, but do you look for projects that include them?
No, what I really love is transporting an audience, and visual effects have just advanced in such a beautiful way that with a lot more authenticity and detail and scope, you can transport audiences to places. And so that's what I look for. Not so much the technical challenge, but I'm excited, you know, and I benefit from the years of experience, but it's ever changing, and it, you know, and it always comes down to who your collaborators are. And I've found that you know, with all with all the key department heads, they're all filmmakers, you know. And yeah, the buck stops with me, and I'm supposed to be the decider, and I am, and I'm happy to wear that mantle and take that responsibility. But you know, I talk to special effects supervisors and artists as though they're actors or writers, because you know, they're great filmmakers. Same with Molly Hughes, our production designer. She's an artist, you know, and brought so much to the story beyond creating these remarkable caves that, you know, when the divers went through the caves, they said, we thought we were back there. It was fantastic. Molly was so relieved by that.
We've got Don on the line now. Don, before I have you ask your question, please go ahead and lower the volume on your TV while I ask another question that Ben submitted. Ben wanted to know how many days of shooting there was, and how did the boys who were stuck in the cave survive all the time that they were in there? And then kind of toward Richard's question, how much was done digitally?
Okay. Well, the caves were built. There were set extensions. So we built the front of the cave. We couldn't go to the real place because it's changed quite a bit. And COVID wouldn't allow us into Thailand at that point anyway. So when we did our tip up to reveal the Tam Luang Mountains, that was a transition to a plate. So there's sort of 3 steps there. There's the practical cave that we shot, then the beginning of a set extension, and then on to a plate from Tam Luang. You know, and there were a lot of those kinds of set extensions.
I would imagine the flooding of the rice field, same
Yes, that was digital. We had plates of a dry field and lots of research footage, but we created that digitally as well. So it was always this kind of this combination. And Jason Billington did a great job. There wasn't a massive visual effects budget. We wound up using it more on controlling the murkiness and those set extensions, because I had thought we would do more cave extensions, and we didn't need to do that much. Molly was able to build, and we were able to stay more or less in camera with some slight fixes here and there. Our boys, our actors, are from the north, so they'd never acted before. That northern region is pretty rough and tumble. It's it has its challenges culturally and societally, and it also has a very particular sound, a vernacular, and a dialect, as I mentioned. So I knew that those boys were going to have to improvise a lot, and I knew that we wouldn't have time to translate into the dialect. So I cast actors, and non-actors, and we worked with them to embody those characters, and they wound up having a great experience. One of our Thai co-producers really sort of became the intermediary with the boys. He's also a young Thai director, and he was there to work. I thought he was going to be there more to work on the language with us, and make sure that was authentic. But culturally, he brought a lot to it, and also he just really bonded with these boys. He's also a teacher, and brought about such kind of honesty for them. And the guy James, who played the coach, Tiradon, he's a big star there and a really good actor. He's from Bangkok, so he had to learn that dialect. But he also wanted to reconnect with Buddhism and both prayer and meditation. And so he spent 3 or 4 days at a monastery again, and he started meditating with the boys, and he did teach them. And at the beginning of every shooting day and at the end of every shooting day, we always allowed a little bit of time for James to lead the boys in a meditation. And it was a bonding experience for all of them. Once the film was over, I was so happy. I felt like that the kids, their parents, and guardians had really had a constructive experience. Whether any of them pursue it professionally, some of them could, by the way, some of them are naturals. But whether they do or not, I feel like they had a constructive experience.
So I'm Don, we're going to get to your question in just a second, but I want to say that I feel like from your background as a child actor and an actor, those boys obviously were very well taken care of, and it showed through in their performance.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted them to learn to act and not just me capturing the behavior, and they really did. They really rose to the occasion, and it was fun. The
boy that plays Chai just it breaks your heart every time you look at him. Okay, Don, what's going on?
Okay, 2 quick things. One is I don't remember seeing a movie where I actually felt I was there in those tunnels. Yeah, it had to be awfully hard to shoot in tight quarters and, like I say, the lighting and everything. But I felt not just Das Boot, the German thing about the U-boat, that I feel I was actually at the scene.
Wow.
It was so tight, That, and another thing that's coming to mind is that they put these kids under with the anesthetic. Another thing coming to mind was it had to be positive in one way, in that they were soccer players. They were in good shape, 12, 14-year-old kids. So if it had been older people, it would have been more of a challenge, I think. But there, I felt awfully good about that, not knowing the result.
Well, I think you're right. I also think that the boys from the north are a pretty tough breed, and we have a line like that where one of the Thai divers comes in and says, "The boys from the north are strong," and they were. And that coach did a remarkable job of just keeping them together and keeping them as calm as possible. But so did the divers, and again, remarkable that they achieved what they did, managing to get them all out. Thank you for that compliment. Das Boot is one of my favorite movies ever, and I thought a lot about Das Boot, both when I was making Apollo 13 and also when I was preparing this one. I also wanted, there are 7 different dives. I wanted each one to tell a little different story, reveal something about the experience or the cave itself. Some of them I wanted to approach more as a kind of almost a haunted house kind of a situation. And in others, it was about the individuals and what they were learning about themselves as they were being tested by this. And again, I can't say enough about Syam Mukti-Pram, our cinematographer, and James Wilcox, our editor, because of course we shot and approached it in a kind of a documentary way. The other thing just to say is the actors became so proficient that in some of those tight spaces where Simon Christides, our underwater photographer, simply could not get a camera, the actors became so adept that they could take a mini cam and actually photograph themselves or do the POV shot through some of those extremely tight squeezes and pinch points. And so all of this just lent itself to trying to convey more and more the achievement that the real people involved in all this had done. And I, so we were all really just, and this sounds corny, but we were all really just honored to use what we know and what movies can offer to try to convey as much nuance and detail about this remarkable rescue as we could.
Don, thank you so much for calling. I have a couple of other quick things that were sent in. Kay wanted to say that this film will stay with me for a long time. I was very moved by it. What an artistic achievement.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tony Sawyer, I give you her last name because I'm not doing that with everybody, is the reason I say is she became good friends with your mom.
Oh.
She was involved in Baja on the Land's End, the episode with your mom behind bars.
Yeah. Wow.
She wanted, they ended up sharing a big trailer with a sliding partition, which they left open, and they laughed a lot. Jean proudly spoke of her granddaughter. We got arrested and ended up behind bars. I visited Jean in Burbank frequently after that, and I remember the downstairs toilet very unique.
Well, she really does know my mom. I don't know. Her parents decided that a really good gift would be a plastic toilet seat with silver dollars and quarters embedded in it, and she carried that with her most of her life. That's her Oklahoma roots, living there in Toluca Lake. So this lady knows my mom very well, and thank you for those memories and your kind words. That makes me feel just great.
I know we are out of time. Helen wrote in with some wonderful comments as well. Do you have time for one?
Yes.
One?
Yes, I think so.
A beautiful movie. Bravo to you. Beautiful gift. She only has one question. Why did you decide to have very little footage of the trapped group, either before they were discovered or after the first shot of them?
I wanted to put the audience as much as possible into the mindset of the parents and the divers and the Thai officials. And so it's one of those things that you try to do when you're dealing with a true story is you even though people know what the outcome is, on a short-term basis, you try to create questions and anxiety and suspense. And so I felt if you knew what was going on with those boys, it was going to take away from that moment when the divers really see that they are there. And on the one hand, that's great news, but on the other hand, they recognize that there's really no way to extract them. And so this was the writer Bill Nicholson's original idea in the screenplay. And many people, along the way questioned this, but I defended it because I believed that Bill's dramatic sense of this was right. And I wanted to create as big a moment as possible of discovery. And so creatively, it was a little controversial throughout, but that was the choice that we ultimately went with.
I agree with that choice, frankly, because it made you, every time that they went back and found the boys, those of us that watched it actually happen know the outcome. But if you didn't, you don't know if each time they rediscover them, someone is lost.
That's it. You're always, I mean, when making a film like this, and then I do have to
Yes,
jump.
yep.
But sure, we know the outcome, but you know, most of us, even people who haven't lived their lives in the business, you know, it's just as viewers, as readers, we get pretty good at guessing the endings. It might narrow down to 2 or 3 options, but we kind of have an idea about what might happen. Great storytelling is when you create suspense within that larger question, and twists and turns. And in a story like this, it's not just did they get the kids out, it's what did it take on an emotional level, on a physical level. How did it actually work? What did it look like? And on my script, I wrote, sometimes I put just a sentence or a few words just to kind of remind me of what my sort of simple mantra is around a movie. Don't always have one. I should, but I don't always. With this one, it was Anatomy of a Miracle. And I felt that if you could get granular with how this was achieved on the most human level, but without being sentimental, without forcing it, that you know you'd be shedding some light on this experience, that audiences could really take something fresh and personal away from watching it. And so that was the goal. And I had a great team pulling together, just believing in our mission, which was to try to get this as right as it could be.
Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate the movie and you being with us here at MPTF.
Thanks to everybody who took the time to watch it. I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ron Howard, everybody.